I would be like crying on the couch and just like releasing all of this pain from the relationship for hours. And she would just sit there and just kind of, say, let it out, like it's okay. And I think truly letting myself feel all of it. And, we say that, but it's really uncomfortable to actually let yourself like go to the depths of your own suffering. But that's what I did. And ultimately, I think that's what's propelled me to, actually heal rather quickly from something like that, is allowing myself to feel it all. Because when you go to the depths of your own suffering, there's duality in life. We have to then experience, kind of like the opposite and the polarity of that as well. And so I think that experiencing those depths gave me a strength, that something that no one can take away from you.
Hey, Mile 40 fam. Are you craving a social life without the hangover? I'd encourage you to join Zero Proof. It's a lighthearted community diving into all things connection, lifestyle, and fun without the drinks. From wellness tips and product highlights to real life stories and every way to have a blast beyond the bar, Zero Proof has you covered. Be a part of the Zero Proof movement and take your social game up a notch. It's honestly one of my favorite newsletters. I'm going to put the link in the show notes for you all. Check it out. And if you enjoy it, tell them that Mile 40 sent you over. Again, check out Zero Proof. Thank you for tuning in to the Mile 40 podcast. I am Bishoy Tadros, the author of Break Barriers and Audacious, both of which are sold on Amazon. And I invite you to join me as I engage with guests to discuss those bounce back moments that we encounter on our personal journey. Mile 40 is a forum to learn about how athletes, professionals, and leaders of all backgrounds stare down moments in life where the only option is to rise up. The Mile 40 podcast strives to remind listeners that the comeback is always greater than the setback. Welcome back to another episode of the Mile 40 podcast. Thank you all for continuing to tune in. We are in the holiday season and I am full of gratitude. I am so grateful for all of you for continuing to tune in, for your feedback, for your reviews. If you haven't already, please be sure to hit subscribe if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you get your podcast from. Check out the show notes, pick up a copy of Audacious or Break Barriers. I may be biased, but I couldn't think of a better stocking stuffer for your loved ones out there. Today's guest is a guest I am super grateful to have on the podcast, and I am very lucky to be introducing her. I have Ash Moraca. She's the founder of Retreat, a mental wellness platform designed to bridge the gap between spirituality and mental health. With a unique blend of business acumen, spiritual guidance, and over a decade of experience in e-commerce, Ash has crafted a platform that empowers users through somatic breathwork, meditation, and spiritual education. Driven by her own journey through mental health challenges, Ash brings an empathetic and transformative approach to wellness, aiming to inspire others to connect with their best selves. An Oxford MBA and certified yoga and meditation teacher, Ash is committed to reshaping the conversation around inner growth, resilience, and authentic self-discovery. Ash, thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a delight to be here.
Of course, of course. I love the way that you closed out your bio because that is so in tune with everything Mile 40 is about: inner growth, resilience, and authentic self-discovery, right? Audacious, the subtitle was Uncaging Your Authentic Self. And so I know that you and I have a lot of synergy and I cannot wait to dive in. One of the things that you recently shared with the world, which you and I already spoken about, and that I know that a lot of people who know you probably already knew, was the fact that you've been traveling a lot. You're living that nomad life a little bit these days. Tell us a bit of where you are today, and give us an update on what life is like lately.
Yeah, the last couple of years, I've definitely been kind of a nomad and traveling. And I actually just moved out of Miami last week. I was based out of there for the last year and a half. And the plan is to nomad for the next 6 to 8 months and kind of figure out where's next. So right now I'm in Portugal. I'm actually here living in a co-live community. So the idea is that it's myself, about 20 other entrepreneurs, creatives, remote workers, and we're kind of like co-working, co-living. And then they've brought in meditation and yoga programming for us. So we have like a twice daily practice, and it's a really beautiful way to kind of like co-create an experience with other like-minded people.
Did you start living this life during COVID, or was it before?
It was during COVID, yeah, so I went back to school in 2020 and got my MBA, and once I graduated in a year later, 2021, I started the nomad life for about 2.5 years, and I enjoyed it, for being able to kind of, like, explore and see all these incredible places, but definitely found it isolating, which is, kind of what led me to settle, in Miami for a year and a half, and ultimately kind of wanted to get back on the road and explore, but being more, mindful about how I do it in the sense of being really intentional with the communities I want to enter into.
It's interesting. A lot of people toyed with the idea of doing what you did, but not a lot of people pulled the trigger. And so I'd love to get into your head a little bit to understand what may have been going on at your life where you were like, you know what do I really have to lose by doing this?
Yeah, it's interesting because I had just graduated from like quote unquote like prestigious MBA. A lot of my like peers and colleagues were off like getting investment banking jobs, consulting jobs, and I was there saying, I want to go like start a business and not have a home and just kind of like live out of a suitcase. So I really think it kind of, came from the sense of just wanting to explore, like explore the world, but also explore myself. And, prior to going to the MBA, I kind of started to have a little bit of like a spiritual awakening. And it, I think, set me on this course of discovery and not necessarily wanting to follow like a traditional path for myself.
Got it. Well, that's a great segue then, because I think we need to go back and learn a little bit about what life was like for you earlier on. So tell us a little bit about childhood and where things kicked off for you.
hmm it's really interesting the premise of your podcast, and I think I mentioned to you this earlier around like mile 40, but like I have to say that my spiritual journey actually started through getting injured running a marathon. And it was at like kilometer 30 that I like quote unquote hit a wall. And, you know, I was like, what's happening? It was my first marathon. And ultimately what ended up happening was I actually broke my hip, a stress fracture in both hips, actually, worse on one side. And I ended up finishing the marathon, pushing through, but obviously, like, absolutely wrecked and destroyed my body. And that was the first time in my life, like, the recovery from that was the first time in my life where I was forced to be with myself and to sit and not distract myself by the achievements, the million things I had going on. And so it was like a huge catalyst for, ultimately having to like come face to face with kind of, quote unquote, like your inner demons, whatever I'd been kind of running from. And I think tying it back to like earlier on in life, um, you know, I, on paper, had a great life, loving parents, middle to upper class upbringing. My parents are both entrepreneurs, really inspiring story. It was definitely an environment at home where it was very achievement focused. And so I think that because of that, I, wanted to just prove myself for love. And I kind of always focused on the next achievement and the next goal. And through that process, I think I lost myself. And then the marathon and that experience was the first time where I kind of had to face it.
Well, how old were you for that during that marathon, and where was it?
It was in Toronto,
Okay.
and I was about 27, 28 at the time.
Okay. All right.
Mhm.
There's a lot of parallels on this show between people who have these moments, usually in that 25 to 30 range. It's definitely telling for a lot of us, and maybe it speaks to like our generation in general, where there's a lot of yearning for self and um, a lot of people seeking out what truly fulfills them, what their purpose is, why they do what they do. And kind of similar to you, you know, why do we keep chasing milestones? Because what do the milestones really do to serve us? So tell us a little bit about, what happened after you kind of found yourself in this position. And
Mhm.
maybe even tell us a little bit about what got you to the start line in general.
Yeah, for the marathon, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I think I've always had something in me that wanted to like set big goals and achieve them. And for me, that like the marathon start line really felt like that opportunity. I think it gave me a sense of purpose as well when in other areas of my life, I think it was probably lacking. And, after that point, I started to develop like some mental health challenges actually, kind of through this process of not before. I think exercise was a way to release some of that like stress and tension. And when I didn't have that because of my injury, which by the way ended up going undiagnosed for almost 8 months. So it took me like a year and a half to really heal from it. So it was like an extended time period of really kind of like navigating through this. And that, period after the injury was really kind of like my first dive into spirituality, almost as a way to kind of like cope and to get myself through it. And that's when I really started to kind of like reframe how I viewed the world and wanting something different out of life. Like I felt, a bit dissatisfied with, the life I was living. And it felt like there was something more for me, like something more out there. And that's ultimately what led me, like that time period and kind of having this time to go inward is what led me to actually apply to MBA school. I was like, okay, I just need a year that's different. I need a year to kind of like check out from this day to day and focus on myself and learn and grow and be around, like-minded people. And so that was like the next step into going back to school and kind of taking that year out.
How uncomfortable was that for you?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I want to share more about actually the process after business school because that's actually like the crux of like the really challenging mental health period that I went through. Yeah, so graduated, just came off of this incredible year of, connection, learning. And then I start living as a digital nomad, working for myself. So complete loss of connection. Financial resources were a challenge, a lot of uncertainty as to like, what's going to happen business wise, where am I going to be living? I'd gotten into a new relationship that now in hindsight, I recognize was toxic. And so all of these things kind of, were a melting pot for a really serious mental health kind of challenge over a couple of years. And so I struggled with depression and suicidal ideation during that time. And, it felt like kind of similar to the marathon story. It's like I was able to kind of like cover up things in the past, cover up, past traumas, things I didn't want to deal with. And then this experience, once again, being in this kind of bubble, living without any sort of connection or community to the outside world, I had to come kind of like face to face with all of it. And it got to a point where it was like so overwhelming that, I think in the suicidal ideation realm of things, I almost think of it as like a release valve. It's like the pain and suffering that you're going through. It's like that's in, psychologically your mind kind of goes to that as like the release. And so that experience is what really led me deep into spirituality as a way to see the world differently.
You brought up the fact that, you were deep in isolation and then you found yourself in a relationship that was rather toxic. Talk to us about how you approached relationships before that, and perhaps what your history was, as deep as you'd like to go, of course,
Mhm.
because what I want to get at here is was there a trend in your life that walked you into this era that maybe then you uncovered, after that? Or was it really just a matter of fate, that got you to where you were?
Mhm. Yeah, I definitely see a trend, in hindsight. I mean, I think it's difficult kind of when you're
Of
in
course.
it to know what's going on. But really the trend was like continuing to give my power away to someone else and to kind of, put someone else on a pedestal and think that they held the answers. And through that, like slowly over time, continuing to make choices that like didn't honor who I was as a person and what my values are. And slowly over time, recognizing that you can really lose yourself and lose yourself to that. So that is ultimately what ended up happening is that over the years I lost myself. I didn't know who I was anymore. I had no like sense of agency over my life. I had no kind of like of my own inner compass or direction anymore.
I wonder as I hear you speak if there's a parallel between this and a lot of high performers out there tend to allow the especially early on when they start to see success and as they're building success, they allow the outside to define them because the outside, tells them that they're great or that they're good at this or that they're good at that or that they've, got this title or if they made this much money or, they've come up with this, really good idea that at times like it's ironic because you would think that being a high performer, you can hold a grasp of a lot of it, but you kind of to your point, you may lose sight of yourself in the process. And it's really, really difficult. And it's really cool to hear you talk about it openly, honestly, and authentically. Um, because it's not something a lot of people think about. A lot of time people see you surface level and think, she's probably doing great. Everything's probably fine. There can't be anything wrong there. And I think that goes for a lot of people who, overall would be considered high performers. So let's talk a little bit about the steps that you took to kind of redirect yourself at that point.
Mhm. Yeah, it was a mixture of, therapy with, a licensed practitioner. So I kind of had this like mental model that I was working through. And then also I dove really deep into spirituality and like a bunch of different spiritual practices. So everything from meditation, breath work, medicine journeys, diving into like there's so many different like spiritual modalities that I really like leaned into. And I ultimately became a practitioner in a few of them as well. And this time period, like kind of really catapulted me into like a different trajectory in life. Like, 10 years ago, I wasn't spiritual. I had like really no concept of this world. If you had told me that I would be where I was today, I know it's so cliche, like people saying that, but it's so true. And so it was really going deep into these spiritual practices. One thing that completely changed everything for me was the notion of, the body keeps the score and our bodies are holding all of these emotions and past trauma. And once I learned to, regulate my nervous system, but also lean into practices like somatic breath work to actually like move the energy through my body. I felt like I was actually finally making strides because what would happen kind of in therapy, it's like mentally, it's like I knew where I wanted to go. I knew I had overanalyzed. I was so hyper self-aware. And then I could, it's like, oh, I've heard it described as like awareness hell. Like you're so aware of everything and you're trapped by your body. And that's ultimately what happened.
Well, where did you want to go?
I wanted to be free, I wanted to escape from, kind of like the hell that I felt like I was in that what I was feeling, what my mind was telling me. And yeah, I just wanted freedom and peace. I remember saying that actually to some family members and sharing what I was going through. And, sometimes I think the feedback can be like, not everyone's happy all the time. And I'm like, I know. I just want to feel peaceful. Like, I just
Yeah.
want peace. Yeah.
So would you have considered yourself, a prisoner to yourself or like a prisoner to your own um I'm not really sure what the right way to phrase it is, but I kind of want to dive deeper into your head to kind of help the audience understand where you were mentally that essentially led to you saying, I need to explore all these options and I need to figure out how to put the puzzle pieces together to um, redirect my life and position myself to live as peacefully as possible, to have the tranquility to move forward and be the version of myself that I want to be. Um, I just want to kind of you had mentioned earlier, right? The suicidal ideations. You had talked about being in a really dark place, facing depression, so on and so forth. And usually, or I can't really speak to this from personal experience, but from speaking to other guests and from reading up, like it's not like an immediate one day feeling this crappy about myself and the next day I'm in my therapist's office. It's usually more of a progression. Maybe someone comes along and says, Ash, like I see you, like I I want to help you. Maybe I can't help you, but let's talk. Or maybe it's you proactively, doing your own research, saying like, this can't be it. Like I need to figure this out. Can you talk to us a little bit about the path and where you were that led you to kind of doing the exploration that you did?
Hmm. Yeah, you were talking kind of about like what were those emotions I was feeling. I would say the underlying emotion was despair. It was feeling like, I did feel like I was a prisoner in my own mind. I felt trapped, felt isolated. I felt like I didn't have hope. I didn't know how to help myself. I didn't know how to, kind of get out of this situation. And I felt a lot of confusion also around why this was happening. Like, is it something I'm doing wrong? And how to really like navigate through that. I mentioned the therapy piece, and one of the, it definitely is kind of daily steps and habits and practices that ultimately I think over time compounded and got me out of it, as well as like exploring all of these different modalities. Um, Another kind of major piece to it is I ended up doing EMDR therapy, which is really powerful for kind of like processing through trauma in the body. It's actually quite a somatic process. And ultimately, that process helped to uncover some past trauma that was also impacting, um, you know, me in the present at that time. And so that was a big catalyst in terms of kind of like opening myself up um, to really going deep within and really understanding what was going on inside of me. Um, and so for me, that's really kind of like what spirituality is. It's connecting more deeply with yourself and really understanding yourself on a different level.
Two questions for you. Educationally, can you tell us what EMDR stands for? And then on a personal level, again, as deep as you'd like to go, can you let us in on what some of that past trauma may have been?
Hmm. Yeah, so EMDR stands for eye movement rapid desensitization. And so basically, you can do it in person or virtually. And the therapist has a program. I did it virtually. She has a program on her computer that basically it has a moving symbol that moves side to side. And at the same time, they're playing binaural beats. So you're being activated in one side of the brain and the other side of the brain, and you're kind of replaying. The way it starts is you're actually going through an existing moment today that's like triggering you or creating some sort of unease in yourself. And through this process of like desensitization, things kind of like come up in your subconscious, and you're basically then able to desensitize from them. So, really interesting, really powerful. Yeah. And what came up for me actually was some child abuse that happened when I was about 6 years old. And so that was, a real reckoning, a real awakening to kind of like discover that I had all of these like repressed memories. That, it was a family friend. I was at a sleepover, happened like a multiple times as well. And so, yeah, that was a huge, huge part of my healing journey in terms of, you know, accepting that this had happened and accepting like, the memories kind of surfacing, and obviously like navigating through how that one incident would have completely altered the course of my life, and ultimately even to tie it back to the choices of giving my power away, in relationship. It's like at 6 years old, I had my power taken from me. And so it's almost felt like all of these choices that I've made, and this final one in this last relationship where I was able to take my power back. It was like it all came full circle.
If you know me, you know that I like to look good and feel good. As an endurance athlete who trains daily, I need my wardrobe to fit the mold. Roan creates performance-driven clothing for your active lifestyle. Each piece is designed for versatility and made with integrity to outfit you for an active life lived on your own terms. The Roan promise is to help you move forever forward. Use code MILE40 for 20% off online and in-store for new customers only. Visit www.rhone.com, that's Rhone spelled RHONE, or find your local store and move forever forward starting today. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for letting us in on that. I know that it's a deeply personal journey, and it's not easy to face it on your own, let alone share it with an audience. So thank you for that. And as a father of two young girls, that's where my mind immediately goes when I hear someone tell a story like that, because it's just it's very tough to digest, because to think about how it impacts your entire life trajectory. um, and it was something that at the time was probably so out of your control. um, it's difficult, and I kind of lost my train of thought, and I'm sure the audience understands, but it's very, very difficult, and I I I I can't even imagine it's something that ever going to. It's not going anywhere for you. It'll be with you forever in terms of your lived experience, and even going through the healing journey, like it's a part of your story. And um, I just want to say thank you again for opening up about it. Um, so now you come to the realization, you kind of start to uncover that your past trauma played a role in getting you to where you are today. Um, and how quickly do you kind of move forward, as you kind of embrace these new modalities, as you start to explore, these new arenas for healing? Walk us through the role that trauma plays in your life as you go through the journey. So let me kind of make some assumptions here and correct me if I'm wrong. From that young age, you probably suppress these memories. They're probably all the way in the back of your head. Then you got yourself, in this situation of despair, depression, loneliness. Something wasn't right, even though on the surface everything may have looked right. Um, you start to face it, and then all of a sudden, these memories that you had suppressed come all the way back up to the forefront. But you're probably looking at them a little bit differently than you were before, because you realized, I'm strong enough now to face my demons. And I'm not really sure how I'm going to react when I am looking at them head on, but I'm strong enough to face them. Um, Talk to us about that experience, right? And I mean, I think a lot of us can speak to this in different arenas. I had gone to therapy, and I remember, uncovering some of the things that impacted me in the past. And I remember uncovering them in therapy. You kind of have this newfound strength where it's like that's why that happened, and that's why all these other things happened after that, and that's why I behave this way, and that's why I behave that way. So now I'm in control of how I behave going forward, and I have more control of how I feel. And it's definitely something that empowers you. But in the back of my mind, I still always go back to like the original traumatic event, and I'm like, that definitely, you know, eh, that was the big domino that led to a lot of these things. So I know it sounds like it's a long winded question, and I apologize for that. But I kind of want the audience to get your take on, once you were able to face it head on and you realize like that played such a big role in getting to where you are. Where is that experience now? Right. And how is it guiding your journey as you continue to, grow and build yourself?
Something I think that's so interesting around what you shared, and a therapist mentioned this to me as well, is like your subconscious is actually feeling safe enough to like raise these memories to you. So to your point, it's like I at times I didn't feel like I had the strength, but ultimately looking back, I absolutely had the strength to like rise up to the occasion and face this head on. And I would say it was about like, I mean, and of course, it's like an ongoing process of, integrating the experience and integrating the learnings and, everything that, comes out of resurfacing memories like that. But when I look back, I really almost see it as like, I had about a year of like really, really going deep on this trauma and focusing on it and really understanding and unpacking all of the little ways in which like it affects like who I am today. Um, I had the opportunity to go to the Hoffman process, which was like a hugely transformative experience. And they have you go through kind of like these processes, and we're not meant to like give a lot away about the experience in case people want to go for it themselves and have kind of like no expectations experience. But what happened in that, in the Hoffman process was actually an act of like forgiveness towards my abuser. And that unlocked a huge opening within me. I actually had a transcendental experience after finding forgiveness for this person. And I ultimately was filled with, what I can only describe as like universal energy. And I was like, kind of on this extremely high vibration where I was like vibrating with the plants, with the trees, and just filled with love, really. And so that as part, of my experience kind of coming out of healing was hugely transformative. And I think that ultimately, like within the last year, what guided me um, was all of these kind of, little pieces stacking on top of one another. And then I had, the courage actually to leave my relationship and really to see what was transpiring and how, the past was like impacting the present and giving my power away to another person.
So to educate the audience, and I'm kind of pulling this up as you were speaking,
Mm.
the Hoffman process is a week-long residential and personal growth retreat that helps participants identify negative behaviors, moods, and ways of thinking that developed unconsciously and were conditioned in childhood. Did I speak to that
Yeah,
correctly?
you got
S-
it.
So, yeah, I had never heard of it before. I mean, it all makes sense. How long were you with your partner at the time?
At the total, we were together about 3.5 years. So at the
Got it.
time of um, finding out, it was about 2 years. And so
Mm.
it took me like a year and a half to really integrate everything and see kind of what was going on.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, I can only imagine what that year and a half was like because you were probably juggling finding yourself, healing yourself, and should I be in this relationship? Should I not be in this relationship? And how do I handle this with the other person? And that has its own dynamic as well. And you bring up, the notion of forgiveness, and I think that the notion of forgiveness is something that, quite frankly, isn't talked about enough. Like people don't realize that like one of the true pillars of a successful relationship in general, like, is the ability to forgive. Like it is, right? Like they say that holding a grudge is one of the most negatively impactful things you could do to yourself because you're just holding on to weight at that point. And the other person isn't suffering by you holding a grudge. You're the only one suffering essentially by holding on to whatever feelings that you're keeping. And I really do think that it's really cool to hear you talk about how freeing it is, because I do think that it's a topic that's sometimes not brought up to the forefront. And sometimes it's not, given the weight that it deserves um, in amplifying the stability of relationships. So thank you for letting us in on that. Um, so now you come back, you get out of this relationship. do you feel it's a part like, I don't wanna joke about it, but a part of it feels like, when you get laid off from the job that you didn't really wanna be at, or, when you get fired from that job, or when you quit the job that you didn't wanna be at, but you didn't really have a plan, you just know you didn't wanna be at that job. That's kinda what it feels like. Was it kinda like that?
The day after, I used to wake up every morning with dread, and the day after I woke up, it was gone. And, it's not to say that everything was easy after that and it was like an easy process, but it was like, wow, I finally chose myself. And it was like, I think, of course, ending any relationship is challenging. But I think waking up the next day and having like a bit more peace, which is what I ultimately wanted, was like a huge underline to be like, yes, this was the right decision for me.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean,
Yeah.
I get that, and um, I think it's really cool for a lot of listeners to listen to this, to, like, understand and see your experience head on, and to know that, you know, it's okay to put yourself first, especially when your body and your mind and your soul are telling you that, something isn't being properly served. We'll go back to it now. You wake up, you feel free. Talk to us now about how you kind of went from there to where you are today, because I know a lot has happened now in that period.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I ended up actually going home, and spending about like 3 months with my family. I felt like I just needed support and love and to like be around, the people that kind of like unconditionally love you. And that really helped in my healing and having, my parents. It was like a summer I spent with them, holding space for me, and just, I would be like crying on the couch and just like releasing all of this pain from the relationship for hours, and she would just sit there and just kind of, say, let it out, like it's okay. And I think truly letting myself feel all of it, and we say that, but it's really uncomfortable to actually let yourself like go to the depths of your own suffering. um, but that's what I did, and ultimately, I think that's what's propelled me to, actually heal rather quickly, from something like that, is allowing myself to feel it all. Because when you go to the depths of your own suffering, there's duality in life. We have to then experience, kind of like the opposite and the polarity of that as well. And so I think that experiencing those depths gave me a strength, that, no, something that no one can take away from you.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this is your mile 40 era. This is you allowing yourself to hit rock bottom, allowing yourself to, um, go into that fight or flight mode, if you will, around like, I'm going to survive this and I'm going to come out stronger. I've learned my lesson. I've faced myself head on. I've uncovered my demons. I've stared them down. I've started to do the work, and I know that I'm equipped because I'm smart, I'm capable, I'm strong. And that's really, really cool to hear you say that out loud, because it's awesome to draw those parallels for the listeners out there. Like, your mile 40 moment could be, you know, on the couch at your mom's house after, you had experienced what you experienced. Um,
Mhm.
thank you for telling us that. So now, I want to ultimately build to, retreat, and understand how, we got there.
Mhm. Yeah, so, the idea for retreat actually came about just about a year and a half ago. So kind of like as I was going through this whole process of, waking up to, the trauma, and then trying all of these different modalities as a way to heal myself, and really recognizing that there wasn't like a solution or a tool that like spoke to me, that really like met my needs in that moment. And so then, I mentioned I became a practitioner in a couple of the different modalities, and then felt like, okay, I can turn my pain into purpose here, and create something that would help other people going through a similar situation. And so ultimately launched Retreat about a year ago, we're adding a wide variety of like different modalities. So everything from like EMDR that I mentioned to like more spiritual modalities, really as a way to educate people. So, what are these modalities, first of all? Because, it can seem like a black box. What's actually happening in our bodies as we're doing these things? And then also, what are practices I can do? How can I like integrate these things into my daily life? Because another key piece I felt along my healing journey was that I was like outsourcing my healing to all of these practitioners, which there, of course, is a time and a place you need that kind of like handhold support. But ultimately, I think to heal, you have to take agency over, your future, and you have to like take your power back. It's another kind of like through line around taking my power back and saying, I want to be educated myself, and then I want to take my power back and give the power to the people, and allow them to do the same.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, um, as I hear you speak, it amazes me because it's just such a recurring theme, not just on the show, but like in life. The strength that you see in people who at one point were broken. Like, I think that, like, as I hear you speak, like, no one looks back on some of their most traumatic experiences and says, like, I wish I could relive them. But a lot of people look back on those experiences and they say, I'm a little grateful for that, as dark as it was, because it shaped me into the person I am today and it helped me find my purpose today. And I'm not going to put words in your mouth because your experience is far different from my experience. My experience was really founded in a battle with cancer as a child. And it was super traumatic, and a lot of my childhood was gone because of it. But I look back at my experience now, in a much different light than I did back then. Whereas then it was full of darkness, and now I kind of reflect on it as being the cornerstone for everything that I do, to propel a message of overcoming obstacles and hope and all that. And in hearing you speak, I hear something and I feel something similar around, like, I never would wish that experience upon anybody. But, given what you went through in the process you've gone through over the last couple of years, there's no one more equipped to do what you do than you. And that's a very powerful that's a power. It's a power that you hold. And there's definitely going to be people who are listening to this podcast or who are in similar situations in general, who haven't been able to talk about their experiences, or who are still, battling through their experiences and haven't come to the point of being able to face them head on, and who are going to need someone like you. And that role is just so important. So I just want to make sure that you hear that from me, because I think it's absolutely critical. Um, was there, along your journey, was there any one person in particular who played a role, in whether it was just a shoulder to lean on, whether it was just, guidance, whether it was someone who really felt like, you could open up to. And, I even think about building retreat, and you were very capable, clearly, in terms of your ability to execute. But it's not easy to run a business. It's not easy to start a business. Like, there was there a mentor along the way who helped you take the steps?
Mm. Yeah, in reflection of that question, so many people are coming to mind. So I can't necessarily say it was, one person in particular. But it's like, cheesy, but like it takes a village. And so I think it's like, I had my parents as, entrepreneurial support and, emotional support, the different practitioners that I worked with, a yoga teacher named Lisa, who came into my life at the perfect time and helped me to kind of, just see things in a different way. I think looking back, there's so much like gratitude and appreciation for the healing process and finding like the right person, the right conversation at the right time. And yeah, I want to say thank you as well for your, reflections. And I'd like to comment as well on, kind of like gratitude for the past. And of course, there might be things I would have changed, or, situations that maybe I wish I hadn't stayed the extra 6 months when I knew it wasn't the right thing and causing myself more pain. But, I have to say, like, I don't know that I wouldn't change it because of where and it's actually making me emotional to like say that out loud. And because it's given me a purpose that I never thought, like, you don't have words for necessarily, a fulfillment in life that just simply wouldn't be possible without going through something like that. And so, yeah, I want to say too, for the people who are going through it, like, continue to have hope. At a certain point, you will make sense of, what you're going through, and you'll be able to, transmute that into purpose, into power. And it can be extremely powerful to own your story and to speak about your story. And today was actually the first time that I shared publicly about, the childhood sexual abuse that I suffered. And so I want to say thank you, like, for creating the space for me to share as well. And I think it's taken time. I've thought about sharing it for about a year. I've had the opportunity on different conversations, different podcasts, and it. I feel a lot of strength and power in sharing it, and so I hope that it does help other people be more at peace with what might have happened to them, or create the space for them to share too.
Ash, thank you so much. I mean, that's the perfect way to end this off, if I'm being honest. You answered anything I was going to ask in that statement. So, thank you for coming on. Thank you for being open with us. Thank you for trusting me, for the Mile 40 community, to take on your story. I have no doubt that your vulnerability is not only going to reach the hearts of so many people, but it's going to empower people. It's going to help them, understand that there's hope out there. It's going to help them think about ways to potentially seek out their own strength and lean into it. And knowing that, that there is hope. So thank you for coming on, and thanks for taking the time to chat with me today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
You got it. Thank you for listening today. If you enjoyed this episode of the Mile 40 podcast, go ahead, subscribe, leave a review, and share the word. Thank you for being a part of the Mile 40 family. And let's unite in showing the world that comebacks are always greater than setbacks.